the 13th of September 2025, headlines across the UK reported that thousands of far-right anti-immigration protesters took to the streets of London, clashing with police and turning violent. But they're not telling you the whole story. I started this channel a few months ago to explore science, history, philosophy, and the wisdom of some of the world's greatest thinkers. At its core, this project is about truth-seeking, about learning how to see the wonder in the world and how to understand what makes a good person. And in my view, being a good person means always striving for the truth, which is why I feel compelled to talk about what really happened on the 13th of September. The march that day wasn't the violent riot that many news outlets described. It was, in reality, almost an entirely peaceful gathering, one centered on celebrating English identity and free speech. I can say that with confidence because I was there. I joined the march at 1 p.m. and I stayed there to around 6, and what I witnessed firsthand is very different from what's being reported. There were people there of all ages, from teenagers to pensioners, people of different backgrounds, from black, white, British, non-British. It was a sea of Union Jacks and St. George flags, not waved in anger but in celebration. The atmosphere there wasn't one of hate, it was one of unity. People were there not to divide but to express a shared love of where they come from and what their national symbol represents. For me personally, it was actually quite moving. Being surrounded by so many people openly celebrating their identity made me feel, probably for the first time ever really, made me genuinely proud of where I come from. Let's talk about some of the inaccuracies in the media coverage. The Metropolitan Police reported that around 100,000 to 150,000 people attended the march, and the organisers, on the other hand, reported that there were around 3 million people. The truth, I think, lies somewhere in between. The police estimate feels far too low, while 3 million people sounds quite exaggerated. But thankfully, we can do a bit of maths ourselves to work it out. The march crossed Westminster Bridge before reaching its final destination. The bridge is 252 metres long and 26 metres wide. That's 6,552 square metres of space. The crowd was tightly packed. I was stood shoulder to shoulder with people almost the entire time. So, if we assume that the bridge can hold an average of 4 people per square metre, that means that the bridge can hold about 26,200 people at once. The march kept moving steadily for about 3 to 4 hours, meaning that there were roughly 1.5 million people crossing the bridge that day. But to be conservative, accounting for pauses, gaps and any delays, let's round it down to roughly 1.3 million people. Now, let's address the claim that this was a far-right anti-immigration protest. This was a march centered around free speech, and while there were a group of people carrying around a banner with anti-immigration slogans saying things like "Stop the boats," this was literally just a small group of people, around 10 to 15 strong, and I actually watched them get off the coach before the march started. Yet those people became the focus of so many photos and headlines. Out of the thousands and millions of people present, the media chose to highlight one group of people, and while, of course, they have every right to voice their opinion, portraying the entire event through their presence is deeply misleading. What the cameras didn't show you were the families, the young children and elderly couples, and just the sheer variety of people who came together. This was one of the biggest peaceful marches in British history, and yet it was portrayed as if it was a violent, hate-filled gathering, which is truly quite sad. Now, in regards to the violence, I'm not denying that there were clashes with the police. I saw many of them myself. Tensions were high, and honestly, I think some of that comes down to poor planning. Tommy Robinson and his team were expecting around 1 million attendees, but far more people showed up. The final destination was Whitehall, which is basically a narrow funnel. Once the area was filled up, the police began blocking areas, but I didn't see any Unite the Kingdom stewards helping direct people or explain what was going on. The lack of communication created frustration and people started pushing back against the lines of police. Tommy Robinson had been very clear beforehand. He wanted this to remain a peaceful march. He asked people not to wear face coverings and not to drink, but as you can imagine, the no drinking rule went out the window almost straight away. And I did see a few people, mostly younger guys, covering their faces. With a march of this size and tension in the air, I have to say I think the police did a very good job overall. That said, it was very clear that their focus was on us. There was a counter-protest happening near where the speeches were being held. The Met Police claimed that there were around 5,000 counter-protesters, but from what I saw it looked closer to maybe a couple thousand. And here's something that struck me as being a little ironic. While we were marching in the name of free speech, many counter-protesters were waving Free Palestine flags, socialist banners and F Trump signs. At one point, the police moved to clear part of Trafalgar Square, moving us to one side, creating a passageway for the counter-protesters to move out from. That in itself was fine and to be expected, really. But they then brought out mounted police officers and dogs to push the crowd to the side. Given how peaceful things were at that point, it felt unnecessary and only reinforced the impression that we, not the counter-protesters, were seen as the main threat, which only continued to drive up tensions. Meanwhile, those counter-protesters, as they were walking by, were shouting insults at us, calling us Nazi scum and fascists. I'd never met any of these people before in my life, and yet they were screaming these insults in my face. Honestly, it was quite bizarre, but also very concerning. These words have very specific meanings, and yet these days it's very common to just throw them around at ordinary people who simply hold different views to you. That kind of language isn't just misleading, it is also very dangerous. Now, let's put the day into perspective. Based on my estimate, around 1.3 million people attended the march. Out of all those people, only 25 were arrested for offences such as affray, violent disorder, assault and criminal damages. That is just 0.0019% of attendees. And here's the contrast. Only a few days earlier, there was a pro-Palestine demonstration. At that event, 890 people were arrested. 857 people were arrested under the Terrorism Act, and 17 people were arrested for assaulting police officers. And yet, there was hardly any coverage and no public statement from Starmer. So yes, tensions ran high at times, but in the end, this march was a massive success. It was one of the largest peaceful demonstrations in British history, and my hope is that it sends a simple but powerful message. Being proud of your heritage is not something to be ashamed of, and that no matter what they throw at us, our voices will ring clear. Despite our differences in background, in beliefs and where we come from, there is a brighter future ahead if we learn to listen, stand together, and always seek the truth. Thank you for watching.